Hi, my name is Shavin Bandarnayake. I am a second class honours LLB graduate from the University of London and a first class honours BSc Computing graduate from Staffordshire University. These are the 5 tips to ace a law exam. Now, full disclosure before I begin. When I started my LLB back in 2011, I was working full-time, therefore I studied the LLB part-time. I got a second-class honours degree from the University of London. The spider graphs that I developed and the case summaries were done so due to this primary reason. Note the title of this video, which states how to ace a law exam, not pass. If you want to pass a law exam or pass your LLB, you need to go thoroughly through the material which is provided to you by your university, which includes your subject guides, your essential reading material and case law. These are 5 tips that will help you go above and beyond that which is normally expected of a student. So, having said that, let's begin. Number 5. Plan for it. When I studied for my LLB examinations, I had to do so with a lot of time constraints. So I made sure that I somehow managed to get 20 hours of studying in each and every week. And this is how I did it. Every single day, I managed to put in 2 hours of solid study time. How I did this was by changing certain routines in my life. Firstly, I started getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I would get ready by about 5:30 and I would put in 1 hour of study in the morning. After coming home in the evening, I would have a wash, and before I had dinner, I would put in another hour's worth of study. The reason why was very simple. If I would study after my dinner, I would fall asleep faster. So those 2 hours were a necessity each and every day. Now, on the weekends, I used to call those study times cheat days. I made sure to cover 5 hours on Saturday and 5 hours on Sunday. If I was unable to do 2 hours on any one of the weekdays, I would make sure that I catch up on those study periods or study times during the weekend. So no matter what, 20 hours was a requisite, and this was a disciplined structure that I had to maintain throughout my period of studying the LLB. Now, planning for it is only step 1 or part 1 of this particular tip. Part 2 of it is to have a visual representation of it. What I mean by this is always have some sort of chart or a graph or even a calendar in a prominent place at home or your workplace. Each and every time you finish a particular section or finish a particular day's worth of studying, cross it out or mark it as a check mark or correct. Why this is important is, no matter how confident that we are with what we have studied, on the final few hours or the final few days before our examinations, we would all feel jitters and anxious and have butterflies in our stomach. If you have that visual representation on a prominent place somewhere in your home or at work, you will always have an idea of the kind of effort, time that you had put into it. And this will motivate you before you go for your examination. Number 4, read around the subject. Every single student who's following a particular LLB program will be provided with a set of study material. And this is perfectly alright for you to pass your examinations. You will get your subject guides, your case summaries, your essential reading material, lists and lists and lists of documents to go through. But these are the same exact content or the same exact material which is provided to every single student out there. If you want to stand out and if you want to go above and beyond any other student, what you need to do is to start reading around your subject. And what I mean by this is start going through articles, newsletters, seldom heard of cases for that matter. And don't stop there. Think about looking at news on TV, online, whatever it might be, as long as it's relatable to the subject matter that you're studying, be it tort, commercial law, contract, criminal, whatever it might be, it will assist you in developing answers in a much better and cohesive as well as articulated manner. Now, there are several tricks that you can do. For instance, if you're studying for a UK LLB, more often than not, you would have been provided access to online libraries such as LexisNexis, Westlaw, so on and so forth, even Justo for that matter. Make sure that you use graph search facility on these particular sites. What I mean by this is try to search for certain keywords in specific subjects. For example, in commercial law, you might be able to search for agency. And while that is a broad search, you will be provided with a lot of content, a lot of articles which would not have been provided to you by your university. But by doing so, and then incorporating those articles into your answers, your examiner will know that you have taken a proactive approach to your studying and therefore reward you with your grades as well. So make sure you read around your subject. Number 3, practice, practice, practice. Law requires a lot of thinking, and it's not a rote learning subject, which is quite true. But much like any other subject, in an LLB, you will study for a year and then ultimately sit for a 3-hour paper. Now, while you don't need to have the necessary rote learning techniques to go through and by heart every single case or every single argument for that matter, you will still need to have what I like to call as muscle memory to answer those questions. A 3-hour paper means that you have to make sure you write the requisite number of answers. And this means you don't have sufficient time to think about your approach in some instances. When I sat for my TOT examination paper, I had written 40 answer scripts before I actually sat for the TOT official examination. Why this was important was because in my head, I had sat for 10 TOT examinations before my official exam. So I was prepared to answer the questions no matter which way that it was posed to me. All I had to do was make sure my arguments were proper and had a rationale behind it, and the case law that I was implementing and the articles and newsletters I was writing about are accurate, and everything else was sorted because in my mind I had done 40 answers before I sat for these 4 questions. Not only does this help you in motivating yourself, but also assists you in making sure that you are prepared for the entire examination rather than just 1 or 2 questions. Now, in order to prepare for my examination, specifically targeting these examination questions, I developed a set of spider graphs and case summaries, which worked out for me. So if you think that it might be helpful to you as well, I'll leave a link in the description below for you to check them out. So remember, practice, practice, and practice. Number 2, have an opinion or a point. I teach over 1,300 students online, and a question that I get asked most often, even on YouTube, even on this channel, is do I have to write every single thing that I know when I go for my examination? While that may seem frivolous to you when I'm saying it in this manner, it's a valid question. You study for 1 whole year and your entire length and breadth of studying material is tested within a 3-hour time span or 4 hours depending on which jurisdiction and which examination you're taking. The answer to that in a very simple nutshell is no. You're not supposed to write down every single thing that you know. The speciality and the beauty of the LLB is it tests out your articulation and how you apply the law. The most important thing, and I believe this is the key word that you need to think of whenever you're answering questions, is examiners look for conviction. They want to see if you're convinced about the answer that you are giving. Now, how can you be convinced of the answer that you're giving? Make sure you have your own opinion or your own point. Figure out what path you're going to take and have a rational basis in answering it. Don't go about mentioning every single possibility. The only thing that will show an examiner is that you are unsure of the answer that you're giving and that you're trying to satisfy the examiner rather than actually proving your point. Don't think that if you have a different opinion or a different argument than that of the examiner, that you will be penalized for it. On the contrary, as long as you're accurate, you have a rationale, you have a basis, your examiner will reward you for having a solid point and you having conviction in your responses. So make sure when you're answering questions, have a point, have an opinion. Number 1, the most important tip in order to ace law exam is timing. If you are provided with 3 hours to answer an examination paper, and let's for example say you have 4 questions to answer, that would mean you have 45 minutes per question. Now, if you are really serious about answering questions, you will spend a minimum, at least 5 minutes in reading that question thoroughly, up and down, which means you have 40 minutes to answer the actual question. Now let's assume that you break down the question into 4 separate sections, which means each section has 10 minutes each for you to answer. Now hypothetically, let's think you're writing this question, or writing this paper rather, and you miss out on 5 minutes each on every single question, the first 3 questions. By the time you come to your 4th question, you have already lost 15 minutes of the time allotted for you. Now even in that question, you're going to have 5 minutes to read it, right? So you have 40 minutes left to answer it. But already you have lost 15 minutes, which means you have only 25 minutes to answer that question properly. At the end of the day, it means you'll only be able to answer 2.5 sections of a 4-section paper, of a 4-section question rather. Now, a lot of people have asked me, is it possible if I'm running out of time to write down the last question at least in point form? Yes, it's definitely possible. But the problem is, you need to think on the mindset of the examiner as well, because after all, we have to approach writing LLB examinations in a very tactical manner. You're putting down a year's worth of content into 3 hours, remember. So ideally, let's assume that you have answered your first 3 questions brilliantly and your examiner is impressed. The 4th question, however, you have not completed properly and you have done so in point form. When he starts reading that answer, he realizes that okay, this student has lost track of time. If it stops at that point, that's fine. You have gotten your marks for the first 3 questions and you've maybe lost out a few marks on your last question. However, the examiner can also look at the other way. He might think this student has answered the first 3 questions brilliantly, but most probably he has spent more than 45 minutes for each question, which means that particular student has not answered these 3 questions in the allotted 45 minutes of time. This leaves a bad impression in the examiner that you have not been able to adequately or appropriately time your answers. This is where the 3rd point that I mentioned, as in practice, comes in handy. Because by the time that you've practiced adequately, let's say answered 20, 30, 40 scripts, you won't even have to look at the clock to determine if you have reached your 45 minutes. Instinctively, you would go through your answer and you'll realize I'm supposed to move on to the next one. Alright everyone, thanks a lot for watching. Those are the 5 tips to ace a law exam. Now, this is a mechanism for you to, if you have a busy schedule or even if you're a full-time student, for you to go from that pass to a second upper or even a first class degree in terms of your LLB. If you feel it was helpful, please leave a thumbs up and maybe subscribe to the channel. Also, if you feel that I can elaborate more on any one of the points that I've mentioned or even all of the points, make sure you leave a comment below and I'll try to make a video for it as well. I teach several law subjects on Udemy. If you're interested in going and having a look at the courses, which has video lectures, spider graphs, case summaries, the works. I'll leave several links on the description below, so check it out. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. See you in the next video. Remember, have fun, stay safe, but obey the law. Cheers.